History beyond sleep. The place where history's darkest secrets refuse to stay buried. Tonight,
it begins not with thunder nor angels in fire, but with quiet. A village simple and small, a child lost in thought, and the heavy silence of history just before it speaks. Tonight, we enter that silence, not to preach, not to convert, but to wonder, because for all that we have been told of Jesus, the miracles, the martyrdom, the message, there remains a part of him that stays just out of reach, not in Scripture, not in stained glass, but in shadow, and in that shadow, a question waits. Who was he really? Who was this man who walked between the lines of empire and eternity? A carpenter with the cadence of a prophet? A teacher who drew crowds yet often walked alone? A figure so fiercely remembered that the world would reshape itself in his wake? And yet the beginning of his story feels almost unfinished. He was born, we are told, in Bethlehem, a moment swaddled in stars and prophecy. But after that, a kind of fading, the flicker of him at 12 teaching in the temple, confounding the elders with his knowing, and then silence, a silence that spans nearly 2 decades. From the age of 12 to 30, not a single verse, not a single memory, not even a whisper. Where did he go? What happened to the boy whose words stirred old men? What did he see? What did he learn? There are some who believe that this silence hides a secret, that the missing years were not lost, but veiled, and that Jesus, before he was preacher, prophet, or Christ, was a seeker, a traveler, a student, an initiate. Could it be that Jesus, during these silent years, was walking paths known only to the few? Could he have studied with mystics in the sands of Egypt, learned from priests beside the Nile, sat in circle with Essenes by the salt-breathing Dead Sea, or wandered the mountain paths of the East to temples where silence was scripture and breath was prayer? Some say he journeyed to India, that he walked where Buddha once walked, that he listened to the chants of Vedic seers, that he heard the Dharma whispered under banyan trees. Others point to Egypt, not the Egypt of pharaohs and pyramids, but the hidden Egypt, the one of hermetic knowledge, of mystery rites, of temples where seekers passed through darkness into light. It is speculation, yes, but speculation shaped by footprints that do not appear in the Gospels, but which echo in the bones of old myths and hidden texts. There are fragments scattered in dusty libraries and monastic scrolls that speak of a foreign teacher in the East, a man from the West, with skin like sun-washed earth and eyes that held both fire and peace. These echoes are faint, like a name half remembered in a dream. But they are there. Still, we are not here to prove. We are here to listen. And in listening, we may sense a pattern beneath the silence, because when Jesus returns, when he steps back into history at the River Jordan, the man who emerges is not just a carpenter. He is something else, something changed. He speaks in paradoxes. He moves with purpose. He teaches with symbols and speaks of kingdoms not made by hands. He heals not only bodies, but the stories wrapped around them. And his every action seems almost rehearsed, as though he is walking a path that has been walked before, but now walked anew. Mystery schools of old, in Egypt, in Greece, in Persia, taught that transformation begins with death. Not the death of the body, but the death of ignorance, the dying of the self that clings, and that before one can lead others, one must first descend, must be stripped of all identity, must walk the wilderness alone. And that, too, is what Jesus does. He is baptized. He disappears into the desert. And when he returns not as boy, but as bearer of light. Some believe that what we are witnessing here is not just the beginning of a ministry, but the unveiling of an ancient initiation. And if that is so, then what he taught, what he revealed, may have roots deeper than we know, deeper than Bethlehem, deeper than Galilee, deeper even than the scrolls of Israel. Perhaps there is something older at work, a sacred lineage that moves like an underground river, beneath temples, beneath teachings, beneath time, a secret order, not a society of conspiracy, but a tradition of light keepers, wisdom bearers, silence walkers, and perhaps Jesus was not its founder, but its flame. This chapter is not meant to answer. It is meant to open. To pull back gently the veil of history, and to let a little moonlight fall on the shadowed paths behind the man we think we know. As you drift into sleep tonight, let your thoughts walk slowly through those quiet years, the lost years of a carpenter's son. Years filled not with absence, but with becoming. And if you listen closely, in the soft folds of silence you may hear the footsteps of a seeker on his way to becoming the light. There are pages in every sacred story that seem missing. Not torn, not burned, not lost to time, simply unwritten, as if someone somewhere quietly decided, this part is not for you to see. The story of Jesus is one such tale. After that brief glimpse in the temple at age 12, a boy speaking as if he had lived before, the Gospels go quiet. He disappears, and when next we see him, he is 30. No child, no youth, no man becoming, just there, fully formed, radiant with purpose. 18 years. 18 silent, sacred years. It is a silence so wide, so deliberate, that it calls out to be filled. And so, across centuries, seekers have asked, where did he go? What happened between the temple and the Jordan? What did he see? What did he study? Who shaped the teacher before he ever taught? The possibilities, though unproven, are quietly astonishing. Let us begin in the east. In the mist-wrapped hills of India. There are stories, ancient and persistent. In Ladakh, nestled among Himalayan peaks, a monastery holds scrolls that speak of a Western sage. They call him Isa, a traveler from the West with skin the color of sand and sun, who came to learn, to teach, to walk among the sadhus. They say he studied the Vedas, sat in stillness among the yogis, spoke of love, unity, and the divine spark in every soul. Was it him? We cannot say, but the teachings, the teachings, they shimmer with eerie echoes. Blessed are the meek, he said. Turn the other cheek. Resist not evil. In India, these are not new thoughts. They are ancient waves in an ocean of Dharma. Non-violence, surrender of ego, oneness with the divine. These ideas were old before Rome was born. Could the lost years have led him there? To the feet of gurus, to forests where silence blooms? Others say Egypt. Not the Egypt of pharaohs and gold masks, but the hidden Egypt, the Egypt of initiates and mystery temples. For centuries, seekers came to this land to pass through its rituals, rites that mirrored death and rebirth. The temple schools of Thoth, guardians of the Hermetic way, taught of the One, the Logos, the divine within all things, and Jesus, who would later speak in parables of light, of inner kingdoms, who would walk on water and still the storm with a word, seems strangely aligned with those ancient arts of the divine mind over matter. Could he have walked the halls of Dendra? Could he have knelt beneath the stars carved into ceilings, learning the sacred geometry of the soul? Again, we do not know, but we wonder, and wondering is its own form of devotion. Closer still, across the sands and nearer home, were the Essenes, Jewish sect, secluded near the Dead Sea, keepers of strict purity, sacred timekeeping, and apocalyptic vision. They believed the world was fallen, and only a chosen few would be prepared for what was to come. They bathed in silence, wrote in symbols, shared meals in ritual, and spoke of a teacher of righteousness, a holy man of great light, long awaited. Their writings, hidden in clay jars and stone caves, speak in tones hauntingly familiar, of light and darkness, of inner, knowing of the spirit. They were not unlike monks, not unlike mystics, not unlike him. Daunt, and perhaps, among their quiet ranks, he found something of himself. Perhaps he studied among them, not as a founder, but as a brother. There are even whispers of Persia, of contact with Zoroastrian firekeepers, guardians of the eternal flame. Zarathustra, the prophet of light, spoke of a coming savior, a Saoshant who would restore the balance of good and evil. The Magi, those same travelers who followed the star to Bethlehem, were Zoroastrians. Could they have come not just to worship, but to recognize him, to affirm what their own scrolls foretold? These theories cannot be proven. They are stitched together from fragments, from footnotes in lost books, from monks' travelogues and local legends. But what they offer is not certainty, only a deeper kind of possibility. And possibility is the doorway to wonder. Because when Jesus returns at 30, he is not just wise, he is formed. He speaks as one who has stood in many temples. He moves like one who has seen far more than Galilee. He radiates an inner knowing that seems to come not from study alone, but from transformation. As if something in those lost years had broken him open and remade him. Maybe he did not journey to India. Maybe he never stepped into an Egyptian temple. Maybe the caves of Qumran held only echoes, not memories. But even if he stayed close to home, wandering Judean hills, speaking to shepherds, listening to wind in olive trees, still something happened, something that turned the boy into a beacon. And perhaps that something was less about where he went and more about what he encountered. Stillness, mystery, loss, love, silence. The lost years may always remain lost, but in imagining them, we find our own journey beginning, because his path was never just his. It was meant to be walked, again and again, by those who seek what hides behind the veil. By you, by me, by anyone who hears the hush between words and wonders what lies beneath. So tonight, as sleep draws near and your breath begins to slow, imagine those years not as blank pages, but as sacred space. Imagine the road beneath his feet, the stars. Above him, the quiet companions who taught without speaking. And feel, in the stillness of your own room, the presence of that same mystery, gently, patiently, waiting for you too. Along the sun-baked shores of the Dead Sea, where salt crystals shimmer like frozen stars, lay a world apart, a world cloaked in silence and sacredness, where time moved to the rhythm of ancient rituals and whispered prayers. Here, in the quiet desert, a community lived as if on the edge of eternity. The Essenes. They were a brotherhood of seekers, bound not by blood, but by a shared hunger for purity, truth, and preparation for what was to come. Cloaked in linen robes, they washed themselves in icy waters at dawn and shared their meals in solemn ritual. Their days were measured by sacred scrolls, their nights by the flickering light of oil lamps and the ceaseless turning of Scripture. This was not a simple sect, nor a passing movement. It was a sanctuary for those who believed the world had become fractured and corrupted, a refuge for souls longing to be cleansed, renewed, and ready to meet a dawning age. Among their treasured writings was the story of the teacher of righteousness, a man of profound wisdom, fierce yet gentle, who would come to illuminate the path through darkness. A beacon for the faithful, he was spoken of with reverence, as one chosen to reveal mysteries and to guide the lost toward light. The scrolls found in the caves of Qumran tell of this teacher with an almost lyrical tenderness, describing his trials and his teachings, his suffering and his eventual triumph over ignorance. He was a figure both human and divine, a bridge between the earthly and the eternal. Might this teacher have been Jesus? The question lingers in the still desert air, as elusive as the shifting sands themselves. We know that Jesus often spoke of purity, of the kingdom of heaven within, and of a coming renewal. His words echo the Essenes' belief in preparation for a new age, and his teachings carry the same rhythms of mysticism and ritual. He healed the sick and cast out shadows of darkness, much like the Essenes sought to cleanse not just the body but the soul. He shared meals with the humble, broke bread with disciples in sacred communion, and vanished into the wilderness for 40 days, all actions woven with the threads of initiation and transformation. The Essenes believed in living apart from the corrupt world, awaiting the arrival of the Messiah who would restore justice and bring light to the shadowed earth. Their hope was fierce, their faith steadfast, and their longing for truth unending. Could Jesus have walked among them? Could he have been one of their own, a brother in the quiet order of light keepers? The evidence is fragmentary but compelling, historical. Records speak of a group living in harmony with nature, preserving ancient knowledge and rituals that have echoes in Jesus' ministry. The echoes resonate in his parables, stories woven with symbols familiar to the Essenes. The imagery of seeds sown on fertile ground, lamps set upon stands, and the shepherd who knows each sheep by name. These are not just poetic devices, but sacred metaphors used within the brotherhood. And yet, the Gospels are silent on this connection. Why? Perhaps because the message of Jesus was never meant to be confined within one group or tradition. Perhaps because the true power of his teaching lies in its mystery, its ability to transcend boundaries and speak to every heart. There is a softness here, a delicate balance. The Essenes were guardians of a secret flame, a flame that Jesus may have kindled anew, or from which he drew strength. The teacher of righteousness may have been a precursor, a symbol or a shadow of the light who walked Galilean hills. Perhaps the order was not so much a group as a lineage, a quiet current flowing beneath history, shaping and nurturing souls in preparation for awakening God. It is in this sacred silence that the mystery grows. The Essenes remind us that wisdom is often hidden in simplicity, That holiness blooms in the unlikeliest of places, and at the path to the divine is often walked alone in stillness, beneath the burning sun and the watching stars dot as you rest now. Imagine yourself walking with them, barefoot on hot stones, your breath steady, your heart open. Imagine the cool waters of the Dead Sea washing over your feet, the desert wind carrying whispers of ancient prayers. Feel the weight of the scrolls in your hands, the sacredness of words spoken in silence. Hear the quiet chants, the soft footsteps on sand, the promise of light breaking through the dark, and know, as you drift deeper into sleep, that mysteries are not puzzles to be solved, but gifts to be held softly in the heart. The teacher of righteousness may be long gone, but his light remains, a gentle flame flickering in the stillness, guiding those who seek the quiet path of truth. The wilderness is a sacred place, not merely a stretch of barren earth, but a space where the soul is stripped to its barest bones, a place where silence reigns and every breath feels like a prayer that it was here, in this place of emptiness and infinite sky, that Jesus disappeared for 40 days and nights. 40 days, a number heavy with meaning, whispered through the stories of prophets and saints, a time long enough to be a trial and yet brief enough to be transformation. The desert, harsh and unforgiving, becomes a temple without walls, a crucible where the seeker confronts shadows, where every temptation is both outward and inward, a battle not with angels or demons, but with the self. We hear the ancient words of the gospel. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. But what does it mean, really, to be tempted? Is it a test of strength alone, or a rite of passage into a deeper knowing? Initiation rituals, from the sands of Egypt to the forests of Gaul, often demanded a descent, a withdrawal from the world, a leaving behind of identity, comfort, and certainty. The initiate is stripped of all but essence, pushed to the edges of fear and loneliness, to face the dark within before stepping into the light beyond. For Jesus, the wilderness was not exile. It was a sacred pilgrimage inward, a time to shed the old self, to be reborn in silence. The tempter comes not only as a figure of evil, but as the voice of doubt, desire, and distraction. To turn stones into bread, it whispers, the lure of satisfying hunger with power. To throw yourself from the temple's height, the call to test fate, to demand proof. To bow down for kingdoms, the temptation to rule through. Forced each is a door, a choice. The initiate does not reject out of fear, but with deep clarity. The desert teaches that true power is born not from conquest, but from surrender. The hunger is met not with bread, but with trust. The fall is met with faith in unseen hands. The kingdoms are refused because they belong to the Spirit alone, and so Jesus walks the thin line of the wilderness, neither crushed nor broken, but made whole. In the quiet hours beneath the stars, the desert becomes a place of communion. The wains carry ancient songs. The sands hold the echoes of past seekers. And the darkness is not empty, but filled with possibility. Some traditions speak of a dark night of the soul, a time when the light seems lost, when silence becomes a test of endurance. The wilderness is such a night, but it is also the birthplace of dawn. As you listen now, breathe in the stillness. Imagine the cold desert nights, the endless horizon, the flickering fire that holds back shadows. Feel the solitude, not as loneliness, but as sacred space, the place where the self meets its true reflection, where the soul is invited to step beyond fear and into light. Jesus' wilderness is a story for all seekers, for each of us will, at some time, wander through deserts, moments when life is stripped bare, when we face the tempter's voice within, when we are called to choose not by force, but by faith. And in that choosing we become more than we were before. Tonight, as sleep draws near, let the desert's silent wisdom settle in your heart. Know that in every shadow lies the promise of dawn, in every test the seed of transformation. The wilderness is not the end of the journey, it is the beginning. And in the quiet, between waking and dreaming, may you find your own sacred space, your own whispered path toward becoming. Words are often like water flowing, shifting, reflecting more than they reveal. And sometimes truth hides beneath the surface in ripples and shadows. Jesus, the master storyteller, spoke not in simple sentences but in parables, whispered riddles wrapped in everyday moments, small stories heavy with meaning. To the casual listener, they might seem like quaint tales, a sower scattering seeds, a lost sheep found, a prodigal son returning home. But to those who listen deeply, they are doors, ancient keys that unlock mysteries. Parables are the language of the hidden, a secret tongue used to veil truth in metaphor, to invite those ready to hear and to gently protect the wisdom from those who would misunderstand or misuse it. In mystery schools across the ancient world, teachers often spoke in parables, not to confuse but to cultivate insight. The initiate is taught to listen beyond the story, to see not just the surface, but the depths beneath. Jesus' parables dance between the ordinary and the divine, the earthly and the eternal. They ask questions more than they give answers, inviting the listener into a silent dialogue with their own soul. Consider the parable of the sower. Man scatters seed on different kinds of soil, some rocky, some thorny, some rich and deep. The seed, fragile and full of promise, may grow or may falter depending on the ground it finds. Is it merely a lesson in farming, or a metaphor for the heart, the fertile soil where faith and love may take root? Or the lost sheep. One among 100, wandering, lost, alone in the wilderness. The shepherd leaves the many to find the one, not for profit, not for praise, but for love. A profound symbol of care, redemption, and the value of each soul. These stories carry layers, like sediment in a riverbed. Each listening uncovers another layer of meaning, another whisper of truth. But why the veil? Why not speak plainly? Because some truths are too fragile for the world's clamor. Because the path to awakening is not in force, but in invitation. Because wisdom knows the value of silence between words, of space for the heart to discover rather than be told. The parables are not just teachings, they are initiations. Each story is a riddle, a puzzle that turns the mind inward. They call the listener to wakefulness, to self-reflection, to a place where faith is not blind, but born of insight. This secret language echoes older traditions. From the Egyptian mystics to the Greek philosophers, from the Persian magi to the Jewish rabbis, symbol and story have always been the vessels of sacred truth, safe havens where mystery can live and where the seeker can drink deeply without being overwhelmed. Jesus' parables carry the weight of this ancient wisdom, not as secrets to hoard, but as gifts to pass gently, From one heart to another dot tonight, as you close your eyes and drift toward sleep, let the stories settle softly in your mind. Picture the sower in the field, the shepherd searching under a silver moon, the prodigal son walking a long, quiet road home. Let their meanings bloom like flowers in the stillness, not demanding understanding, but inviting it, for sometimes the deepest truths are those whispered softly, meant not for shouting, but for holding close. And as your breath slows and your thoughts become a gentle tide, know that in this secret language of parables, you are hearing a conversation between your soul and the eternal, a dialogue as old as time itself. Among the many figures who walked beside Jesus, one stands wrapped in both mystery and light, Mary Magdalene. She is named often, yet known so little. A woman of many shadows, many whispers, many misunderstood stories. Tonight, we step softly into her presence, not to unravel gossip or legend, but to listen to the quiet song beneath the noise. Mary Magdalene, perhaps more than a follower, more than a witness, may have been the keeper of secrets, the guardian of the inner flame in ancient texts. Discovered centuries after the Gospels were written, she appears not as a mere disciple, but as one closest to the truth. The Gnostic Gospels call her the one who knew the all, a teacher in her own right, an initiate who walked beside the light with steady heart. The inner circle of Jesus was small Peter, James, John, and yet Mary's presence is undeniable. She stood at the foot of the cross when others fled. She was the first to witness the empty tomb, and the first to see what others could not, the risen light breaking the veil of death. What was the nature of her relationship with Jesus? Was she a companion, a confidant, a spiritual equal? Some whispers suggest a bond deeper than friendship, a sacred partnership, a union not only of hearts, but of mysteries shared. In the times and cultures of her day, a woman's voice was often silenced. To be named so prominently is itself remarkable. And yet, history and tradition have veiled her role, dimming her light beneath layers of misunderstanding. But the ancient brotherhoods, the mystery schools, knew well the power of the feminine, the wisdom bearer, the silent strength, the secret keeper. Could Mary Magdalene have been the living embodiment of that sacred feminine? Could she have held the keys to teachings that transcended words, passed quietly from teacher to chosen? Some scholars and seekers believe that the early Christian movement carried whispers of a sacred union, not just between man and God, but between man and woman as vessels of divine truth. Mary Magdalene represents that union. She is the bridge between the outer world and the inner sanctuary, the voice of compassion and courage intertwined. Her story invites us to see beyond roles and titles, to recognize the balance of light and shadow, masculine and feminine, in the unfolding mystery of faith. As you settle into the quiet of night, imagine Mary's calm gaze, her steady presence at the crossroads of loss and hope. Feel the strength in her silence, the fire in her devotion. See her not as a footnote in history, but as a radiant flame. In the darkness, her story reminds us that the journey toward truth is never walked alone, and that sometimes the greatest wisdom comes from those who quietly bear the light, even when the world turns away. Tonight, may her courage inspire you, her loyalty comfort you, and her mystery remind you of the sacred within us, all in the stillness before sleep. Hold her story gently in your heart, a whisper of love, a call to deeper knowing, a quiet invitation to walk the path of light with open eyes and an open soul. The evening air hung thick with the scent of olive trees and the quiet hum of gathering. A small room, lit softly by flickering lamps, held 12 figures seated around a low table. This was no ordinary meal, but a moment suspended in time, a ritual, a farewell, a sacred act that would echo through millennia. The Last Supper. It is one of the most haunting and revered scenes in the story of Jesus. Yet beneath the well-worn images lies a deeper mystery. Was this simply a meal shared by friends on the edge of tragedy? Or was it something far more profound, a ritual filled with hidden meaning, a revelation veiled in bread and wine? Throughout history, sacred meals have served as bridges between the earthly and the divine. The Essenes, those secretive desert dwellers, shared their own solemn feasts, rituals of purification and unity, moments when heaven and earth touched. In Egypt, the ancient priests performed rites to commune with gods, and in Greece the Dionysian mysteries used wine and bread to symbolize transformation. Jesus' Last Supper may be part of this timeless tradition. The breaking of bread, a bird. Simple act, yet charged with symbolism. The bread, body broken, the wine, blood poured out. These were not just words, but codes, echoes of ancient rites, reborn in a new context. When Jesus took the bread and said, "This is my body," and lifted the cup, saying, "This is my blood," he was offering more than nourishment. He was offering initiation, an invitation into a sacred mystery, a communion not just of flesh, but of spirit. Each disciple was called to partake, to become part of a covenant older than any written law. In that circle of 12, beneath the soft glow of oil lamps, something profound was given and received. The meal was both farewell and beginning, a passing of a sacred flame, a seal upon a mission yet to unfold. Yet this ritual also concealed a deeper truth, known only to the inner circle. The Last Supper was not just remembrance, but revelation, a map of the soul's journey through death and rebirth. To eat of the body and drink of the blood was to enter the sacred path, to embrace transformation, to die and rise again in spirit. This mystery meal would become the cornerstone of a faith, yet its deeper meanings remain veiled to many, waiting patiently for those willing to see beyond the surface. As you listen now, breathe deeply. Imagine the soft murmurs in the room, the breaking of bread, the passing of the cup. Feel the sacredness of the moment, not as distant history, but as an invitation into your own journey of awakening. The Last Supper reminds us that the most profound truths are often wrapped in the simplest acts, and that ritual, when understood, becomes a pathway to transformation. Tonight, as you drift into sleep, may you carry this sacred meal within you, a silent promise of renewal, a quiet call to communion with the light within. In the still hours before dawn, when the city sleeps under a veil of quiet dust, a solitary figure is led through narrow stone corridors, his hands bound, his eyes calm, his silence louder than any shout. This is not the procession of a criminal. It is something far older, a rite as ancient as time itself, the trial of the light before the throne of power. Jesus stands before the councils of men, not as a warrior, not as a king, but as a witness. The Sanhedrin, first-robed scholars, with heavy scrolls and heavier silence, questioning not with curiosity, but with fear. What law had he broken? What threat had he posed? He spoke of the temple falling and rising again. He dined with the unclean and healed on the Sabbath. But more than this, he had disturbed something deeper, the unspoken order, the careful balance of religious tradition and Roman tolerance. And so they question. But he answers not in defense, only in truth. To Pilate next, a Roman governor tired from ambition and the noise of empire, a man trapped between conscience and convenience. He sees in Jesus no criminal, only something unsettling, a quiet that disarms, an innocence that accuses without words. Are you the king of the Jews? Pilate asks, half curious, half weary. Jesus replies with a whisper, my kingdom is not of this world. And with that sentence all power is unmasked. For the empires of men build walls and armies, but this man speaks of kingdoms invisible, of spirit, of truth, of the heart. What is truth? Pilate asks, not knowing the answer is standing before him. This trial is not about guilt or innocence. It is the ancient drama, the light confronting the machinery of fear, the living soul walking quietly through the halls of dead authority. No verdict is needed. The outcome was decided long before the sun rose. The crowd gathers, not the poor, not the healed, not the followers in silence, but the crowd of power's choosing, stirred by voices of fear. Crucify him, they shout, not because they know him, but because they do not, because the truth often feels like a threat to those who cling to comfort. Yet in this hour of betrayal, something strange begins to unfold. Jesus does not resist. He does not beg. He walks forward, step by step, into the shadow prepared for him. This is the initiation all mystics must face, the passage through the courts of the world, the refusal to compromise, the stillness in the face of judgment. It is a moment mirrored across traditions, Socrates before the judges, Buddha before Mara, the initiate before the abyss. To be condemned by the world is often the final mark of the awakened. And so in silence he accepts the sentence, not as defeat, but as completion. The carpenter's son, the teacher in parables, the healer of hearts, now becomes the Lamb, the archetype, the soul willing to pass through death for the sake of life. As you lie now in the comfort of night, let your thoughts wander to that courtroom, lit by torches and trembling hands. See the calm figure standing before power. Hear the hush that follows every truth he speaks, and ask gently, what in you is being questioned? What part of you stands quietly in the court of your own heart, awaiting judgment not from others, but from your own soul? For every seeker must one day face their trial, not with rage or defense, but with stillness and love. The trial of Jesus is not history alone. It is the echo of every soul that chooses the inner kingdom over the praise of the world. Tonight, may that stillness hold you. May his courage become your own. And may the hush before dawn remind you that even in the courts of power, the truth walks softly, unafraid. There is a moment carved into the fabric of time when silence weeps. A hill outside the city walls, 3 wooden beams, a crowd held, not by hatred alone, but by something older ritual, etched into their bones. And at the center, a man whose arms are spread not in defense, but in offering. The crucifixion is for many the end, a moment of defeat, of agony, of divine abandonment. But look closer, through the mist of sorrow, through the veil of grief, and you may see a pattern emerging. The cross is not just an instrument of death. It is a symbol ancient, exact, alive. Long before Calvary, the cross was known. Etched into temples, carved into stone, a figure of balance, of convergence, of sacred proportion. In Egypt, it was the Ankh life eternal. In India, it appeared in mandalas, a fourfold axis linking earth to sky. In the Druids' groves, it marked the turning of the seasons, the crossing of spirit and flesh, the vertical heaven reaching into the earth, the horizontal humanity reaching across to one another. And at the center, the heart, the still point of presence. So when Jesus is nailed to this cross, he is not merely executed. He is positioned at the center of the world's ancient geometry. Here, flesh and spirit collide. Here, the suffering of one becomes the doorway for many. Here, the silence of God becomes the language of love. His arms open not in pain alone, but in a cosmic embrace. It is not the nails that hold him, but choice. Every mystic tradition speaks of sacrifice, but not as punishment. Sacrifice sacrum facere means to make sacred. And in this moment, the body becomes sacred. Suffering becomes sacred. Even death, in its cold finality, is drawn into the current of redemption. The sky darkens, the earth trembles, not in judgment, but in recognition. For this act, this brutal, beautiful surrender, is a mirror to the human condition. We, too, carry our crosses. We, too, are pierced by sorrow, misunderstood, abandoned, betrayed. But through him, those wounds become windows. The cry, my God, why have you forsaken me?" is not despair. It is the echo of every soul who has known silence from heaven and still chooses to love. The cross becomes the map, from suffering to surrender, from death to transformation. Even the number 3 crosses, 3 hours, 3 days, whispers the language of sacred cycles. Death is not the final word. It is the hinge, the turning point, the silence before resurrection. And in that stillness, as the body hangs in shadow, as the crowd begins to disperse, as the sky begins to breathe again, we are invited to do the same. To be still, to face our pain without fleeing, to understand that sacrifice, when chosen with love, becomes the most powerful act of all. Tonight, as your eyes grow heavy, imagine the cross not as punishment, but as a portal. See the figure there, not defeated, but shining with quiet purpose. Let the shape of the cross rest gently in your heart, its symmetry, its silence, its call to surrender. And know that whatever you carry, you do not carry alone. The geometry of love holds you in its arms, a stone rolled across the mouth of a cave. Silence, darkness, the scent of myrrh and aloes lingered in the air, wrapped around linen, around memory, around what the world believed to be the end. The tomb, cold, carved into the side of the hill, was meant to hold finality. It was not a chamber of life, but of closure. Yet even before the third day had come, a strange stillness filled that hollow place, not grief, not absence, but a kind of waiting, because the tomb of Jesus was never truly empty. Not in the way we think of voids, not in the way that finality claims. It was filled with something else entirely, mystery, across time and tradition. The cave is more than a grave. It is a symbol of initiation, the sacred womb from which transformation is born. The ancient initiates of Eleusis were placed in darkness, in caves beneath the temple, where they died in ritual and returned as reborn souls, touched by something eternal. In Egypt, the dead were placed inside the pyramid, the stone tomb becoming the gateway to stars. In Persian rites, too, and among the Druids, dark chambers marked the beginning of vision, and so it was here. Jesus' body was laid not just to rest, but to transform, not destroyed, but changed. There are whispers, faint, fragmentary, of the tomb not being silent at all, of light appearing in its depths, of linen wrappings collapsed in the shape of a body, but without the body itself. And then the mourning. Women came, Mary Magdalene among them, to anoint, to mourn, to complete what had been interrupted by Sabbath. But what they found was not what they expected. The stone had been moved. The tomb was open, and instead of death, there was the strange pulse of presence. Empty, but full. Gone, but near. The angelic messengers asked, "Why do you seek the living among the dead?" A question that still echoes through the halls of faith. And then there he was, not in flashes of glory, not with a heavenly army, but in a garden. As a gardener. Alive, yes, but changed. He speaks Mary's name, just her name, and her eyes are opened. Recognition blooms not from evidence, but from intimacy. The resurrection, you see, was not announced with trumpets. It was whispered. It was not a spectacle. It was a secret, unfolding gently, heart by heart, even in the appearances that followed. On the road to Emmaus, on the shore at dawn, in the upper room behind locked doors, there is a quietness. He does not force belief. He breaks bread. He shows hands. He speaks peace like the tomb. He is no longer bound. His presence flickers here, then gone, then here again. Not like before, but more deeply. The body has changed. The story has changed. Everything has changed, and still the question lingers. What is resurrection? Is it the return of flesh and breath, or the unveiling of a deeper life, one that cannot be touched by time or bound by death? Perhaps the tomb was empty, not because he had fled death, but because he had filled it with light, with meaning, with the possibility that endings are only thresholds. Even now, when we visit the tombs of our own lives' griefs, losses, the aching absences, we can listen for the hush of presence, that not all absence is abandonment. Sometimes it is transformation. Sometimes what seems gone is simply waiting to be seen in a new way. So tonight, as your breath slows and you enter the stillness behind your eyes, let the image of the tomb rest gently in your mind. See the stone rolled away. Feel the morning air cool on your face, and sense just faintly the shimmer of light where you expected none. For the mystery of the resurrection is not just that he rose, but that he still rises in silence, in sorrow, in gardens where we least expect him. And the tomb? It was never empty. It was filled with the breath of a new beginning. The sky holds many stories, whispered by winds, sung by birds, and written in the endless dance of clouds. Among these stories is one both tender and profound, the ascension of Jesus, the moment when earth and sky clasped hands in a silent embrace. It is a scene painted not with grand spectacle, but with quiet grace. The disciples gather on a mountaintop, their eyes lifted toward the horizon, hearts heavy with hope and sorrow. Jesus stands before them, no longer bound by flesh alone, but transformed a bridge between the world they know and the mysteries beyond. With a blessing spoken soft as a breeze, he begins to rise, not as a warrior triumphant, nor as a god descending in thunder, but as one who steps gently into the unfolding light. The earth watches in stillness, the wind holds its breath, and the horizon swallows the form that once walked among them. The ascension is both an ending and a beginning, a final farewell, and a promise carried on invisible wings. For in this moment, Jesus transcends the physical, becoming a presence woven into the fabric of the cosmos. His departure is not absence, but transformation, a passage from the seen to the unseen. Across traditions, ascension stories speak to the human longing for transcendence, the soul's journey beyond limitation, the return to a source greater than self. In the ancient mysteries, the initiate is lifted beyond the veil, passed through the layers of illusion, and welcomed into the vastness of being. Jesus' ascension echoes this sacred path. It is an invitation to see beyond the horizon of ordinary sight, to recognize that life is never confined to flesh and bone, but flows endlessly into the infinite. Yet for those left below, the moment is bittersweet. They watch the space where he disappeared, their hearts a fragile mix of loss and faith. The earth feels emptier, but the promise remains that he is near, in ways unseen but deeply felt. This silent ascension calls to each seeker, reminding us that all endings hold the seed of new beginnings, that departure can be a doorway, and that love does not end with a farewell. Tonight, as you settle into rest, imagine that mountaintop, feel the soft breeze against your skin, hear the quiet voices of those watching, and see the gentle rising light. Let the ascension become a symbol for your own journeys, the moments when you must release, trust the unseen, and step forward into the unknown. May the stillness of this moment cradle you, and the promise of transformation whisper softly in your dreams. For life, like the ascending figure, is forever reaching toward the sky, toward light, toward peace, toward home. Time is a river that carries many stories, some loud and roaring, others soft as a breath. Among these currents flows a whisper, the legacy of a secret order, a thread woven through the tapestry of history, sometimes hidden in shadows, sometimes glimmering in the light. If Jesus walked among a brotherhood, then his story does not end on dusty roads or empty tombs. It continues quietly, invisibly, in the hearts of those who hold the flame, in the ancient codes passed from hand to hand. The secret order was not about power, nor fame, nor conquest. It was about awakening, about carrying forward a sacred trust, a knowledge beyond words, a path walked in silence and love, from the deserts of Judea to the hills of Galilee, from hidden caves to whispered gatherings in moonlit rooms. The teachings endured, guarded by those who understood that truth is delicate, not a trophy, but a seed. Throughout history, echoes of this lineage appear. In the mystical orders of medieval Europe, in the scholars who studied forbidden texts, in the quiet souls who dared to question and to seek. The Grail legends, the Knights Templar, the Rosicrucians, each carries a spark of that ancient flame, a reflection of a truth too vast for open eyes. And even now, in the silent corners of the world, there are those who listen for the old songs, who carry the teachings deep within their hearts. This legacy is not a secret to be uncovered with maps or keys, but a living invitation to walk the path of the light, to seek wisdom beyond the noise, to hold faith not in dogma, but in experience. It is a legacy of paradox, hidden yet visible, silent yet speaking, ancient yet always new. For the secret order's greatest gift is the reminder that the divine is not distant, but present, woven into the fabric of every day. Life waiting to be discovered in a glance, a word, a moment of stillness. As you rest now, let this whisper settle in your soul. Imagine the quiet gatherings, the shared meals, the scrolls held close, the light passed gently from hand to hand. Feel yourself part of this unbroken chain, one link among many, carrying a flame that no darkness can extinguish. The story of Jesus, the teacher, the initiate, the light-bearer, is not just history. It is an invitation to seek, to question, to awaken. And in that seeking, we become part of the legacy. So tonight, as sleep draws you gently down, may you carry this secret flame within you, a soft, steady light, guiding you through dreams and beyond. For the secret order lives not in shadows alone, but in the quiet courage of hearts open to mystery and to love. There's the book that is read aloud in temples and churches. And then there is the one written in silence, the gospel behind the gospels, hidden not in parchment, but in experience, in whispered memory, in mystery. 4 canonical voices, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, each holding a fragment, each painting the same figure in different strokes of light. But beneath them lies something older still, a deeper layer, a current beneath the surface. In dusty jars and forgotten caves, new scrolls emerged, fragments of the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Philip. Voices that speak, not to law or lineage, but to the soul's quiet yearning. Split the wood, and I am there, says one lost gospel. Lift the stone, and you will find me. These are not commands, but awakenings. The Gospel of Thomas does not tell a story. It offers sayings, seeds of light, each one a riddle, meant not to be solved, but to be sat with, like incense in a quiet room. It speaks of the kingdom, not as a faraway place, but as a state of being already present, hidden in the heart, waiting to be remembered. This hidden gospel is less about belief and more about becoming, less about what to do and more about what to see, within, around, and beyond. The Gospel of Mary, too, speaks in hushed tones, preserved in torn pages and fading ink. It gives voice to a woman often silenced, a disciple, a teacher, one who knew the Master's heart. In it, Mary recounts visions not of commands, but of cosmic maps, journeys of the soul, through layers of illusion, toward the peace of the all. And in the Gospel of Philip we hear of union, not of flesh and doctrine, but of soul and spirit, of divine marriage, the sacred reunion of the fragmented self. These Gospels were not hidden because they were dangerous. They were hidden because they were powerful, because they spoke not to authority, but to awakening. To truths that could not be institutionalized, only lived. They were preserved not in vaults, but in memory and secret gatherings in the quiet. Spaces where seekers listened. And now, across centuries, they have returned to remind us that the gospel is not a fixed path, but a living mirror, that Jesus did not come to be worshipped from afar, but to call each of us inward, to become what he saw in us, to remember what the world made us forget. These Gospels do not erase the four, but deepen them. They do not compete, With the canon they complete it, not as rivals but as echoes. Tonight, as you lie still beneath the hush of sleep, imagine these pages faded, fragile, held with reverence. Let the words float softly through you, not to be grasped, but to be felt. Whoever drinks from my mouth will become as I am, one fragment whispers, and I shall become them, and the hidden things shall be revealed. Let that mystery cradle you, for you too are a gospel, a sacred text in motion, a story unfolding in breath and silence. The gospel behind the gospels was never lost, God. It lives in you, and always has. Sometimes the truth is not spoken aloud, but carved into doorways, drawn into dust, woven in patterns that only the quiet-hearted can see. Jesus of Nazareth, a name that echoes across time, gentle, radiant, mysterious. But Nazareth itself was more than a village, and the word Nazarene more than a label. There are those who believe that Nazarene was not just where he came from, but what he was, a title, a vow, a hidden lineage whispered through generations, tied to an ancient code. The Hebrew root netzer means branch, and from the branch comes new life. Prophets foretold, a branch shall grow from the root of Jesse ... A subtle signal, one known by those who watched the signs, who waited for the anointed. Could it be that Jesus walked among a sect of silent initiates? A Nazarene brotherhood, those who lived apart, devoted to purity, to inner discipline, guardians of the old ways, keepers of symbols older than the temple. Like the Essenes, they were said to be watchers of the stars, interpreters of dreams, seekers of a deeper light. They moved quietly in deserts, hills, caves, unseen, yet present. Their signs were never loud. A fish drawn in the sand, a single word carved into stone, ichthus. To the world it meant little, but to the initiated it meant, you are safe here. You are not alone. Jesus wrote once in the dust, as accusers stood ready with stones. We do not know what he wrote, but perhaps it was not a word but a sign, a symbol to those with eyes to see. This is a moment of grace. The code of the Nazarene was not written in books. It was carried in the body, in fasting, in silence, in the way one walked. A man could be known by his gentleness, a woman by her. Gaze steady, compassionate, unafraid. To follow the code meant living outside the machinery of power. It meant not answering violence with violence. It meant truth, even when it cost everything. It meant being a vessel, not of law, but of love. There were gestures, mudras of the hands, ways of greeting that meant, I see the divine in you, not a wave, not a bow, but a stillness held between two souls. Even in death, the code persisted. When Jesus was taken down from the cross, his body was wrapped in linen, an ancient act of reverence. And in some tellings the cloth bore a trace, an imprint, not just of his face, but of the mystery he carried. The code of the Nazarene was not about secrecy for secrecy's sake. It was protection, a way to carry light in a world that still feared the dark, a way to pass wisdom without awakening persecution. And so signs were hidden in plain sight, in the parable, in the silence, in the stillness before a miracle. Tonight, as the world fades to hush, imagine those quiet codes. A hand on a shoulder, a word left unsaid, a knowing glance between strangers. Perhaps you, too, have known such moments. A sense of something passing beneath the surface, too deep for words, a recognition, a remembering. That is how the Nazarene Brotherhood moved, not to be known, but to help others remember. To remember who they are, to remember the kingdom within. As you rest now, let these quiet signs drift through your dreams. Let them speak in silence, as they once did long ago, for the code was never lost, only hidden, waiting for eyes that know how to see. After the voice was silenced, and the light lifted from the world, there was not despair, but dispersal. Like seeds scattered by wind, the Brotherhood did not vanish. It withdrew. Into mountains, into caves, into the silence between empires. They became the carriers of the inner flame, not extinguished by crucifixion, but hidden in cupped hands, shielded from storm, preserved for those yet to come. After the ascension, when Jerusalem burned with tension and fear, those closest to the mystery disappeared from the center, not in fear, but in obedience to a deeper rhythm. Some say they went east into Persia, where Magi had once walked under stars. Others whisper they moved north toward Gaul, Britannia, the mist-veiled isles, where ancient druids still listened to the trees. In each place they left not relics, but rhythms, a way of living, a way of loving, a code that made no claim, but left behind an echo. The Brotherhood was never built on stone temples or thrones. It was passed from soul to soul, in quiet rooms lit by oil lamps, in prayers shared beneath the moon. They taught without teaching. They healed without speaking. They listened more than they led. They were not priests, but gardeners planting small truths into receptive hearts, watering them with silence, trusting the Son of Time to bring them forth. Some took the gospel into hidden lands, not with conquest, but compassion, not to convert, but to reveal. For theirs was not a message of fear, but of awakening. Do you not know, they would ask gently, that the kingdom is within you? And those who heard and understood became light-bearers in their own right. They did not seek converts. They sought kindling souls already aflame, waiting only for a breath of wind. Legends tell of them sheltering the Magdalene on foreign shores, of John retreating to Patmos with visions swirling in his mind, of Thomas walking all the way to India, planting words like trees in far-off soil. But wherever they went, they carried the same gift, not a doctrine, but a presence. Even when they were hunted, misunderstood, branded as heretics by rising institutions, they did not strike back. The flame was not theirs to defend. It was theirs to carry. And so they kept walking, one generation to the next, not building cathedrals, but shaping lives. Some became mystics in monasteries. Some became healers in humble villages. Some vanished into deserts, known only by the footprints they left behind in sand, but all held the same silent vow to keep the light alive until the world was ready to see it again. Tonight, as you lie in stillness, imagine that gentle procession, men and women cloaked not in robes, but in peace, traveling not in caravans, but in trust. And feel, if you listen deeply enough, that perhaps they are still walking, still whispering in dreams, still planting seeds beneath the noise of the world. Perhaps you've passed one once, in a hospital, hallway, in a library, in a garden at dusk. A stranger with kind eyes, a word you didn't know you needed, a silence that healed more than advice ever could, for the Brotherhood never died. It simply changed form, Dot, and now perhaps you too are part of it, a carrier of that inner flame, a witness to the light that no darkness has ever overcome. Symbols are the silent language of the soul, whispers etched in stone, drawn in dust, woven into the fabric of time. They speak not to the ears, but to the heart's quiet chambers, unlocking doors that words cannot open. Dot, in the story of Jesus and the secret order, symbols played a sacred role, not as mere decoration, but as vessels of hidden meaning, keys to the mysteries entrusted to the faithful few. The fish, for instance, ichthys, simple yet profound. To the untrained eye, just a shape traced in sand or carved in stone. To the initiated, a declaration, Isis Christus Theou eu eis soter. Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. A coded message of hope in times when speech was dangerous. The dove, a symbol of peace and spirit, soared quietly in frescoes and whispered through prayers. The lamb, innocence and sacrifice, a reminder of the paradox of strength and surrender. Even the cross itself, with its intersecting lines, was layered with meaning beyond the obvious. A map of the cosmos, a compass of the soul. Dot, in secret meetings, initiates exchanged gestures, hands pressed in subtle greetings, the number 3 held softly between fingers, a silent nod to the Trinity and the cycles of renewal. The chalice, the bread, the flame, each a symbol, each a sacred sign pointing beyond itself to the eternal. These symbols were not locked away in dusty books, but lived in the very breath of the community, passed from elder to child, hidden in parables, woven into art and ritual. They protected the teachings from persecution, but also invited those who truly sought to read between the lines, to awaken to the depths beneath the surface. For symbols are alive, changing, shifting, speaking differently to each generation, and they remind us, gently, that truth is not always shouted from the rooftops, but whispered in shadows, waiting for those with eyes to see. Dot, as you close your eyes tonight, imagine these symbols floating softly in the twilight of your mind, each one a gentle key, opening the doors to places beyond fear, beyond doubt. Let their shapes and colors weave through your dreams, a sacred geometry of light, a quiet language of love, and know that you carry these symbols too, etched not in stone, but in your heart. Dot, ready to guide you, whispering the secrets of the ages as you journey through the quiet night. Beneath every great mystery lies a silence, and within that silence often a woman. Her name is Mary Magdalene, not the fallen one of later stories, but the witness, the beloved, the first to see the risen light when even the brave had scattered. She stands at the threshold of 2 worlds, between the visible and the hidden, between memory and myth. For centuries her story has been wrapped in veils, twisted by time, brushed aside by the architects of power. But when you listen closely, when you sit in the stillness between the lines of Scripture, you begin to hear her again. Not in scandal, but in silence. She was not merely the woman with the ointment jar. She was the one he called by name, the one who understood the mystery he carried. In the Gospel of Mary, a text lost for centuries, then found like buried treasure. She speaks with clarity and strength, teaching the other disciples what Jesus had revealed to her alone. Visions of the soul's ascent, passing through the forces of darkness, guided by inner knowing toward reunion with the all. It is not theology, it is wisdom. Mystical, feminine, whole, and yet they doubted her. Peter asked, "Did he really speak to a woman in private and not to us?" A question not born from curiosity, but from fear. And so began the forgetting. The erasure of the feminine voice, the severing of the sacred balance, but truth is never lost, only hidden. Mary's presence did not vanish. It flowed underground, into legends of the Black Madonna, into tales of her voyage to the shores of France, into whispered stories of a sacred union, not of flesh but of soul. Some say she carried a child. Others say she carried the teachings. Perhaps both, but more than facts, her legacy is a fragrance, like nard spilled on feet, its scent lingering long after the moment has passed. She is the face of the divine feminine, the part of Christ's story that embraces, that listens, that weeps and sees and knows without needing to speak. While others looked for the kingdom and power, she looked for it in presence. She saw him not only with her eyes, but with her being, and he, in turn, trusted her to see, to know, to speak. Her gospel was one of remembrance, not of rules, but of returning to the self, to the light within, to the union that holds all opposites in love. Tonight, as the stars rise one by one in quiet succession, imagine her standing in a garden, mist curling around her feet, tears falling like dew, and then the voice, Mary, a name spoken not in power, but in love, and that moment, that recognition became the first spark of a resurrection, not just of body, but of truth. Let her story rest beside you now, soft as a shawl around your shoulders. Let it remind you of what has always lived within you, the wisdom of listening, the courage to remember, and the light that rises when you dare to see. There is a road that wins inward, silent, unseen by the hurried world, where footsteps fall softly on the soul's deep earth. This path is older than words, older than temples and scrolls, a journey not of miles, but of moments, each one a step closer to the quiet center within. Jesus knew this path well. Before the crowds, before the sermons, before the miracles, he often withdrew into solitude, into deserts where the wind whispered secrets, into gardens where the stars seemed near enough to touch, into silence where the soul listens not to noise, but to the still, small voice within. The mystical path is not a place of escape, but of encounter, meeting the self, meeting the divine, meeting the world anew. It is a way of presence, where time slows and the heart learns to rest. The desert became his classroom, its vastness teaching lessons of emptiness and fullness, of hunger and satisfaction, of surrender and strength. Temptations that visited him, they were not merely trials of flesh, but invitations to see beyond illusion, to discern the true from the false, to choose the path of light even when it meant walking alone. Mystics through the ages have followed this road, from the silent caves of the Essenes to the cloistered cells of monks, to the hidden chambers of Sufi dancers spinning toward union. They teach us that silence is not absence, but presence, that solitude is not loneliness, but communion. And in that communion the outer world fades, and the inner landscape blooms. This inner journey is not marked by milestones or maps. It is felt in the soft unfolding of awareness, and the gentle letting go of fears. In the quiet surrender to what is. It is where the secret order found its strength, not in numbers or weapons, but in hearts trained to listen, to discern, to be, tonight. As your breath slows and your body sinks deeper into rest, imagine yourself on that quiet road, walking barefoot over soft earth, the night sky wide above you, stars blinking like old friends. Feel the cool air on your skin. Hear the whisper of leaves, and know that with every step, you move closer to your own stillness. There is no rush here, no judgment, only the gentle unfolding of presence. Let this journey cradle you tonight. Let the silence wash over you like a soft tide, carrying away the noise, leaving only peace. For the mystical path is always open, waiting for each of us to come home. Words are more than sounds. They are seeds small, potent, waiting quietly in the fertile soil of the mind. Jesus spoke in parables, stories, spun like silk threads, woven with mystery, designed to awaken not just understanding, but insight from within. These tales are gentle puzzles, doors ajar to inner chambers, inviting those who listen with heart to step softly inside. The sower who scatters seeds, the mustard plant that grows from tiny beginnings, the lost sheep seeking the fold, each carries more than surface meaning. They map the terrain of the soul, chart the struggles between light and shadow, show the delicate dance of forgiveness, the power of surrender, the promise of rebirth. The parables are not simple lessons, but mirrors reflecting back to us our own doubts, fears, hopes, and longings. They do not preach or demand, but whisper and question, offering freedom to find meaning in the spaces. Between words. And the story of the Good Samaritan, we learn that kindness transcends division, that love crosses boundaries built by fear. In the parable of the prodigal son, we glimpse the heart's infinite capacity to return home, to be embraced despite mistakes and wandering. Each story unfolds layers of meaning, like petals opening at dawn, revealing new beauty to the patient watcher. Jesus' teaching was a delicate art, a dance of revelation and concealment, offering light only to those ready to receive it, while shielding the deeper truths from those unprepared. This method kept the sacred flame safe, a whispered wisdom passed among seekers, hidden in plain sight. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, let these parables come alive in your mind's eye. See the fields where seeds fall softly, hear the footsteps of the wanderer, feel the gentle hand that lifts the lost one. Allow these stories to move through you, not to be solved, but to be lived. For the parables are not just tales of long ago, but maps for the inner journey you walk today. They remind us that truth is never forced, only invited, that the kingdom is not a place to conquer, but a state to awaken, and that love, always love, is the path home. There are revolutions that shake the earth, and there are revolutions that move quietly through hearts, changing the world not with thunder, but with the gentle power of love. Jesus' message was this quiet revolution, not a call to arms, but a call to awakening. To love without limit, to forgive without measure, to see the divine spark in every face. It was a revolution that unsettled kings and priests alike, because it asked for something more radical than armies or laws. It asked for transformation of the heart, love as resistance. Love is strength. The secret order understood this well. They knew that true power is subtle, not found in swords or thrones, but in acts of kindness, in moments of mercy, in the courage to be gentle. This revolution was not loud, but persistent, a current running beneath the surface, shaping the course of history in ways unseen. It was carried in the healing touch, in the feeding of the hungry, and the welcome of the outcast. It was written in parables and lived in silence. Love, they knew, was the force that could break chains, not only those of flesh, but those that bind the mind and spirit. And so they passed the message on, not with banners, but with hearts open wide. In the centuries since, this quiet revolution has flickered like a candle in the dark, sometimes nearly snuffed out, sometimes blazing bright, and still it endures. Tonight, as your breath slows and your body settles into rest, let the power of this love wash over you, soft as a wave, deep as the ocean. Let it fill the quiet spaces within, and remind you that even in the darkest times, love remains, a hidden power, waiting patiently to be known. As you drift into sleep's embrace, carry this quiet revolution with you, a gentle fire that never dies, a light that guides you home. For love is the secret that changes everything, and it begins with you. Beneath the broad canopy of early Christianity, there stretched hidden pathways, quiet roads winding through the forests of doctrine and tradition. These secret trails were known only to a few, those who walked softly, listening for the whispers of the sacred. The early followers of Jesus did not live in a world of open books and abundant light. Instead, they navigated shadows, persecution, fear, and suspicion. Their truths were fragile, often cloaked in allegory, passed by word of mouth, and guarded in hearts like precious gems. Among these pathways lay the teachings, reserved for initiates, mysteries spoken only to those prepared to hear. Insights hidden in parables and symbols, keys to doors that most could not yet open. The Gnostic communities, for example, thrived on these hidden teachings, texts like the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Mary that invited seekers beyond literal meanings into realms of inner knowledge. Here, salvation was not about escape from the body or the world, but about awakening to the divine spark within, the light trapped beneath layers of illusion, waiting to shine. Secret rites marked passage from one level of understanding to another, moments of initiation where the soul was gently guided through darkness toward illumination. These rites were not public spectacles, but intimate encounters with the sacred, held in quiet chambers, under the veil of night. The brotherhoods guarded these mysteries, not to hoard power, but to protect fragile truths from misunderstanding and harm. In a time when voices could be silenced with a sword, words became weapons, and silence became sanctuary. Tonight, as you lay down to rest, imagine yourself stepping onto one of these hidden pathways, walking softly through shadows and light, feeling the weight of ancient wisdom in your breath. Know that these secret teachings are still alive, not locked away in dusty scrolls, but alive in your own heart, waiting to be discovered when you are ready. Let the gentle mystery of these hidden pathways cradle you into sleep, a quiet invitation to awaken slowly to the deeper truths that dwell within. For in every silence there is a song, and in every shadow a light waiting to be seen. Some truths are written in ink, others are written in stone, not in letters, but in arches, circles, and light. The early followers of Jesus, especially those who carried the deeper, more mystical streams of his teachings, left behind few words, but they left symbols, spaces, structures, hollowed-out chapels and cliffsides, circular sanctuaries echoing ancient patterns of the heavens. Simple stone crosses carved into rock meant not to preach, but to point the way inward. To walk through these ancient spaces is to walk through a living gospel, not the gospel of creed, but of silence, of light moving through narrow windows, of shadows stretching across altars that once held bread, oil, and whispered prayers. Early Christian architecture was never merely functional. It was contemplative, every angle intentional, every element geometry, proportion, echo was meant to move the soul. Domes reflected the vault of the heavens. Labyrinths symbolized the soul's journey inward. Columns reached like prayers, and hidden chambers so often misunderstood were met not for secrets, but for sacred encounters. There were no loud sermons in these places, only breath, candlelight, and the slow murmur of footsteps. To enter was to step out of time. Some scholars speak of an architectural language, sacred mathematics, passed down through initiates, carried not just by builders, but by those who understood that the way a space holds, you can shape the way you hold the sacred, the Holy of Holies. In ancient temples, the octagonal baptistries, the fish-shaped apse, each held echoes of the deeper path, one not defined by institution, but by intention. Even in later centuries, as great cathedrals rose, their soaring ceilings and hidden side chapels bore the marks of an earlier silence, a memory of something more inward, more veiled. The rose windows, the hidden spiral staircases, the secret passageways beneath stone floors, all remnants of a faith that once walked side by side with mystery. And in certain places, some say, those original spaces still remain, unmarked on maps, known only to a few, hiding in the forests of France or buried beneath desert sands, chambers of stone where silence still lives. But perhaps you have already felt this architecture in a quiet church when the light hit just right, in a circle of trees where your thoughts fell still, in a small room where someone lit a single candle and didn't say a word. For the architecture of the hidden faith is not only built of limestone and marble, it lives in how we shape our inner world. Tonight, as sleep draws near, let yourself enter one of these quiet spaces in your mind. Imagine the cool stone beneath your feet, the gentle flicker of lamplight, the hush of sacred air. Feel the weight of time soften around you, and let your breath match the rhythm of ancient silence. You are in a sacred place. You always have been, and the echoes you hear are not from the past, but from within. In every age, there are those who walk a quieter path, guardians of wisdom, keepers of the flame, who move like shadows through the corridors of time. These mystics and seekers did not seek fame or fortune, nor dominion over others. Their kingdom was within, their treasure a secret known only to hearts awake. From the earliest days of the secret order to the hidden brotherhoods scattered across lands, these guardians carried the sacred trust, not written in books, but lived in silence and devotion. They were healers, poets, teachers, and dreamers, some cloaked in robes, others disguised in common garb, yet all held one mission: to protect the ancient wisdom, to nurture the light that flickered through times of darkness. The mystics spoke in riddles and parables, for words alone could not contain the truth they carried. Their teachings were wrapped in metaphor, their presence a living invitation to awakening. They knew that the greatest mysteries cannot be forced, only revealed to those who seek with humble hearts. Many became wandering souls, pilgrims on sacred roads, bringing healing and hope wherever the light was dim. In monasteries carved from mountains, in desert caves veiled by sand, in forests whispered with the breath of the divine, they meditated, prayed, and danced, always tending the flame. Their lives were often lonely, their gifts misunderstood, but their strength was quiet and deep, rooted in the soil of compassion. They guarded not only texts, but the living spirit behind them, the pulse of love, the call to remember. Sometimes their presence shifted history's course, not with sword or decree, but with a single word, a healed wound, a spark of inspiration. They were the keepers of the secret order's legacy, not as rulers, but as servants carrying light through generations. Tonight, as the world softens into shadow, imagine these guardians gathering around flickering fires beneath ancient trees, in hidden rooms where silence sings. Feel their presence beside you, steady, kind, and unwavering, and know that their flame burns still within you, within all who seek. The mystery of their lives is a gentle reminder that wisdom is not found in grand monuments, but in hearts open to wonder and hands ready to heal, and souls willing to listen. As you rest now, let their quiet strength fill your dreams, a steady light guiding you through the night's soft embrace. Every story has an ending, but some endings are merely whispers, soft breaths carried on the wind, a final note fading into silence. The secret order did not vanish. It folded quietly into the fabric of time, its threads woven through generations, often unseen, but never broken. Like a river running deep beneath the earth, its currents flowed through the hearts of those who listened, those who sought not fame or fortune, but truth. The legacy they left is subtle, not a monument of stone or gold, but a living pulse, a quiet echo that calls us still. It is found in the gentle kindness of strangers, in moments of unexpected grace, in the courage to forgive and to love when the world asks us to harden. The unseen thread connects the past to the present, linking ancient whispers to today's breath, reminding us that the sacred is not lost, only transformed. Across centuries, through storms of doubt and fear, this thread has endured, carrying the flame of hope and awakening. It runs through the secret symbols, the hidden teachings, the lives of those who dared to walk the quiet path, and it runs through you. Tonight, as you drift into sleep's embrace, listen for the last whisper, the gentle voice that tells you you are part of this story, this lineage of light. You are the living legacy, the keeper of the unseen thread, the bearer of a flame that no darkness can extinguish. Rest now in that knowing. Let the quiet strength of those who came before fill your dreams and guide your waking. For endings are beginnings, and the story flows on, softly, endlessly, in the heartbeats of the night. All journeys, no matter how far they wander, lead us back, not to where we began, but to who we've always been. From the hills of Galilee to the scrolls hidden in desert caves, from veiled brotherhoods to forgotten gospels, we've walked the soft moonlit trail of a story less told, yet deeply known. It is not only a story of Jesus, nor only of a secret order. It is a story of us, of the divine spark each soul carries, waiting to be remembered. The ancient ones did not guard a treasure made of gold. They guarded a mirror, one that, when held gently, shows us the sacred within. They whispered, "The kingdom is not found by looking out, but by looking in." And they lived that truth, not through sermons or spectacle, but in stillness, in compassion, in the quiet revolution of love. We are not called to recreate their hidden rituals or decode every symbol, but to embody the same light, the same courage, the same inner knowing dot, to walk through the world not seeking answers, but offering presence, to listen more than we speak, to see each person not as stranger, but as sacred dot. In every era, the path reappears, sometimes cloaked, sometimes clear, but always leading back to the same eternal invitation. Awaken, remember, return. Return not to dogma, but to wonder, not to control, but to connection, not to the past, but to the pulse of something timeless still beating inside. The teachings of the hidden order were never meant to be hoarded. They were meant to be lived. And now, as this quiet story draws to a close, you may realize it never really ends. It continues in you, in the way you walk through your day, in the way you speak, in the love you offer freely, without needing to be seen. The sacred is not far off. It is here. It is now. It is you. Tonight, as sleep gently gathers at your window, let this final chapter fall softly over your heart. Not as an ending, but as a remembering. Breathe slowly, in and out, like the tide, like prayer. Let the long thread of this journey wrap around you, not to bind, but to bless, for you carry the light forward now. The sacred within is no longer hidden. It is awake.